Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Explore. This is week 4, the last week. Thank you so much for being part of this journey. I hope it's really helped you to get a better understanding of Christianity if you're relatively new to it, who we are here at the gathering, how we believe some of these things. We've talked about the Bible and we've talked about Jesus. Last week, I talked about the church and kind of a history of the Christianity family tree, if you will. Where did all these denominations come from? What is the United Methodist Church, which we're a part of? And what makes that different and distinct. And today I really want to end with the gathering specifically. I want to give you a sense of who we are as a church, because I do believe that the gathering is unique amongst churches here in St. Louis or anywhere. And I always like to say at the outset, for me, it doesn't mean that we're better or worse. I really believe God needs a lot of different kinds of churches to reach a lot of different kinds of people. But I do think the gathering approaches faith in a distinct way that I really hope resonates with you. But I want to start with a story. So when I started the gathering way back in 2006, there was sort of, I thought, a void. There was a missing element when it came to church. If you wanted to go to church in the city of St. Louis at that time and you weren't Catholic, you kind of had two options. You could go to a mainline denomination, and it usually had like a more open theology that maybe people liked, but had oftentimes really boring worship. A lot of the mainline denominations were in decline. They didn't have much of a kids ministry. It was maybe had open theology, but was boring. Or you could go to one of the few like more conservative evangelical churches, which often had vibrant worship and a kids ministry and small groups. Your friends went there, but had theology that a lot of people struggled with. You know, women couldn't be in leadership. They didn't welcome LGBTQ people. They didn't talk about kind of issues in the world in a nuanced way. It was a lot of black and white thinking. And I think in the midst of that, people just really felt torn. Like, do I go to a church with an open theology, or do I go to a church that's vibrant and vital that I want to be a part of? And when we started the gathering, I really felt like the Bible calls us to be both of those things. I mean, I often say that we are evangelical, not in the political sense, but in the best sense of the word. That means that we are invitational. We want to share good news with people. We really believe that life with Jesus is better. We want to invite people to just discover who Jesus is, to be welcomed, to sort of figure out and struggle with their faith, to be introduced to Jesus. We really want to share Jesus with new people and see the church as a place that's vibrant and growing. And we believe Jesus has an open understanding of people in the world, much less restrictive than oftentimes the church has been. You know, I really believe that the church should be a place that welcomes you no matter who you are, where you are, that the church shouldn't be a place where everyone thinks the same way or believes the same thing or has the same perspective or votes the same way. And too often the church is seen as that. The church can be a place for people who doubt and people who maybe feel like they have faith figured out, people who've never been in church and who've been in church all their lives, people who have never read the Bible or know the Bible inside and out, people who are living really good lives, or maybe you're really messing up right now in life. We just really believe that the church should welcome all people as they are, and then challenge them to grow in light of who Jesus is. To put it really simply, I believe that the church should be both invitational, wanting to share Jesus with new people, and open to a more expansive understanding of who can come and who can lead and who can be a part of this thing. And so when we started the gathering, we started it as that kind of both-and church, a church that tried to marry these two things, a church that had a more open theology, which I think a lot of you have connected with, a church that felt vibrant and vital and talked about the Bible and believed in Jesus, something that I know is so important to many of us. And we put those two things together. And at the heart of who we are, I think, is that we want to welcome people as they are, and we want to challenge one another to grow in light of who Jesus is, because we just believe that Jesus changes our lives for the better. And so I hope that you felt that as you've come to church here. But I want to talk today a little bit about some of the statements that go behind that help explain who we are, our mission, our vision, and our practices, which you'll hear us talk a lot about around here. So our mission at the gathering is essentially like, what makes us a church? What is it that we're trying to do? And we phrase it this way, that our mission is to invite new people to become deeply committed followers of Christ. To invite new people to become deeply committed followers of Christ. Now, I just want to admit at the outset, you go to almost any church and they'll have something on the wall that says something like this: to invite people to Jesus, to invite people to follow Jesus. Churches ought to have something like the same mission statement, because all these mission statements are rooted in the mission statement that Jesus gave us in the Great Commission. Some of you maybe know the Great Commission. These are the last words of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew. I'll just read them to you. This comes in Matthew 28, and Jesus says this to his disciples: "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. And look, I myself will be with you every day until the end of this present age." So if you pay attention to that statement, you sort of hear two things, and it's reflected in our mission statement, that Jesus tells his disciples first, like, I want you to go out and share this with new people. Baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And then there's this second part, and then I want you to teach them to obey everything that I've commanded you. In other words, there's this invitational thrust, and then there's this, what we call a discipleship thrust, a growing thrust. And so our mission statement captures both of those things, that we want to invite new people to become deeply committed followers of Christ. So first, we have that invite new people. The gathering started as a new church. I often say, if we wouldn't have invited new people, we would not exist as a church. So at the core of our DNA is this deep passion to be a church for people who haven't found a church yet. To consider people outside the walls of the church, to be what I like to call outwardly oriented towards the world, to always be figuring out how can we speak to new people or welcome new people or reach new people or invite new people or make space for new people. So much of our ministry is focused on those who aren't here yet, and you see that all over the place at the gathering. From the way that we welcome you every time you come to worship, we always say, if you're new today, we're so glad that you're here. We hope you'll let us know you're here. We have a gift to give you. That we try to make hospitality a big deal here. I am often encouraging you, please don't just come alone, but invite somebody to come along with you. Maybe somebody who needs to find a different kind of church, who's been turned off by church in the past. Like, so much of our DNA is to try to reach people who feel excluded or burned or bored by the church, who maybe feel like church doesn't have anything to offer them. And we think that comes from Jesus saying, look, I want you to share this with other people. Church isn't just about you. Faith isn't just about you. It's really meant to be shared with others. And so in our mission is this, to invite new people. But then there's the second half, to become deeply committed followers of Christ. That we don't just want to invite people to the church, but we really think that the church should be a place where you can grow in your faith, where other people can grow in their faith, where every day we learn a little bit more about who Jesus is and who Jesus wants us to be, that we encourage one another to continue to grow in spiritual maturity, to know more about the Bible, to develop a better prayer life, to have a deeper relationship with God, that we learn to serve and love other people in better ways. So it's this sort of growth-oriented community that invites new people, but then encourages the people that are here to continue to grow, to become more like Christ every day. And you're never done with that journey. And so I always like to say that it's both oriented towards new people, like that's at the heart of who we are, but that it also cares deeply about those of us who've been here a long time. Like we want to every day make sure that we're a community of breadth, reaching new people, and of depth, helping you to grow closer to Christ, deeper in your faith every day, every month, every year that you're here. So it's both outwardly oriented and really focused on helping you to grow once you're here. And that's who we are. That is what we're trying to do. And I always like to say that because I believe that this is exactly what Jesus wants of us. Jesus wants us to invite new people, and Jesus wants to change our lives once we're here. And I also like to let people know that's why when you come to the gathering, you will see us trying to do those two things. Everything that we do here is geared around one of those two things, helping to invite new people or helping you to grow in your faith. So every time I'm up front, talking about grab a postcard on your way out, invite a friend to come for the Christmas season, make sure to pay attention to the people that are around you. It's because I really believe that we're called to invite people. We have to pay attention to those outside of ourselves. And every time I'm up there talking about, I want you to get in a core group. I really hope that you'll learn how to give and be more generous people. I hope you serve in some way. That's because those are the things that help us to grow, to be more like Christ. And so everything that we do here is aimed at inviting new people to become deeply committed followers of Christ. That's our mission. That's what we do. And I think it's really fair for a church to just say, that's what we hope for you, that you become people who yourselves are growing closer to Christ and inviting other people into that same journey. So that's our mission. Our mission is to invite new people to become deeply committed followers of Christ. But then we have a vision statement. And I know that those two words, mission and vision, people use them in different ways. But for me, our mission is just what makes us a church. I think almost every church ought to look like that, be outwardly oriented and then help you to grow. But our vision is sort of like what makes the gathering a little bit different, like what makes the gathering unique. I had a pastor early on when I wanted to start the church say, Matt, we have so many churches in St. Louis, like what's going to be different about this one? Why do we need another church? And the vision was our answer to that. Like, yes, there are a lot of churches, but what makes our church different? And our vision is this: to create a Christian community that's compelling for new generations of people in St. Louis. That's what we think makes our church a little bit different, is this vision, to create a Christian community that's compelling for new generations of people in St. Louis. Let me just say a few words about that. First, you notice at the front, like we want to create something. Like the gathering, at the heart of who the gathering is we want to be creative. Like in a world where I think so many churches are just looking to maintain like what somebody else started or what has always been done there, to do things the way that they've always been done. The gathering has always kind of thought that, we think that God has called us to be a creative community, to constantly be thinking about not just what we've done, but what is God calling us to do next? I mean, we started as a new church, which meant in the beginning we had to create everything that's here. But I also just believe like faith is always changing. We're always changing. The church ought to be a place that embraces change instead of resisting it like it so often does. And so I often tell people, if you want the church to look exactly the same in 5 years that it looks today, the gathering may not be the best place for you. But if you want a church that's kind of always changing and growing and adapting and asking that question, God, who do you want us to be next? The gathering is a great place for you. So we're called to create. We're called to create a Christian community. That's really important. We're not just here to create anything. We're here to create a community of people that are seeking to follow Jesus together. And both of those pieces are really important. Like, we don't want to just be a church full of what I call like solo Christians. And what I mean by that is a lot of people just want to come to church. Like, I want to worship Jesus or worship God, and then I want to leave. I don't really want to mess with other people. And here at the gathering, we just think that Jesus calls us to be a community. That's why I'm always asking you to consider serving, get to know the people around you. Share your life with others, get in a core group. We think it's important that we're a community. And then I think the flip side is also important, that along with being a community, we don't just want to be friends. We don't just want to get together and do things. We want to get together and grow in our relationship with Christ. We want to be a community on a mission to help people become followers of Jesus. And so we're here to create a community of people that's helping you to grow in your faith. I think a lot of churches do one or the other, but we really want to do both. So we're here to create a Christian community that's compelling. That word compelling is probably my favorite one in the statement, because I think it counters something that a lot of people think of when they think of the church, and that is the church is kind of boring. I mean, there was a survey done a number of years ago about why young people are leaving the church. And surprisingly, it wasn't because they disagreed with it, because they were offended by it, although those things happen. But it was most often because they just thought the church was boring. It wasn't relevant to their lives, it wasn't compelling. And yet, when I read the Bible, the book of Acts especially, which is the story of the first church, the church was a lot of things. It was kind of crazy, it was out there, it was extreme. They were going around, starting riots and doing miracles and getting arrested. It was a lot of things, but you could not call it boring. And I just really felt like when we started the gathering, the gospel is inherently meant to be compelling, something that we want to listen to, something that's relevant and connected to our daily lives. And so we want church to be that way. We really want a church that feels worth it for you, that's relevant to what you're going through in life, that speaks to the things that you're dealing with in your life. When I preach my messages, my goal, honestly, is not that you agree with me or disagree or anything, but my goal is like when you leave the church, it causes you to turn to the person you came with and say, what'd you think about that? That it makes you think about life a little bit, that it connects to something that you're dealing with. The last thing I want you to do is to forget what it is we talked about before you even hit the parking lot. And so here at the Gathering, we want to create a Christian community that's compelling, that's relevant, that's connected to your life, something that you want to come to and that you want to tell other people about. So many churches, I think, are honestly a little disconnected or boring. We want to be compelling. So to create a Christian community that's compelling for new generations, that's a really important phrase. Early on, people would say, Matt, does this mean that you just want to create a church for young people? And I would say no, but it does mean that we do want our church to be one that really especially speaks to younger generations. I think that's really important. No matter how old we are, the older I get, the more I want to make sure that we're passing faith along to new generations of people. Listen, the average age of a United Methodist in the state of Missouri is like 59 to 60 years old. It's probably getting older now. And the average age of a person in the state of Missouri is like 32 years old. That's a huge gap, and it's only widening. And what it means is that for too many years, the church has failed to speak in a way that connects with younger people. And so at the Gathering, we look at everything through a lens of like, what's going to help us to pass faith along to the next generation? And like I said, the older I get, the more I care about that. And I know some of you who are older feel the same way. But it's not just younger people, it's also new people, new generations of people who maybe didn't grow up in church or aren't familiar with church. So many churches are sort of oriented towards the people who are already there, but we really do want to be oriented towards new people. So I often say if you're a baby boomer or younger, you're part of a generation that the church has probably failed to really reach. We have a lot of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s who really are pretty new to church, and we want to be a church that speaks to you. Create a Christian community that's compelling for new generations of people in St. Louis. And that last part, in St. Louis, is probably the part that we have to rethink the most in light of the pandemic. So many of you are listening from so many different places. We have sites now in many different cities, but we left that in there because I think it's really important that the church is connected to the community that it's in. And so no matter if you're at a site that's in the city of St. Louis or in the suburb or in the Metro East or wherever you live and are connected here by listening online, we want to be a church that doesn't just come inside four walls and talk about Jesus, but is connected to the community that we're in, that we want to serve the community and care about the community and show up in the community. We want to make a difference in the place we're in because we think that's what God calls us to do. I don't want, if the church disappeared tomorrow, people ought to notice. The last thing I would want is for somebody here in St. Louis to say, I don't know anything about that church. I've never seen that church do anything outside its four walls. That's why we're involved in so much mission work, our literacy partnership, that we want to be invested in the city that we're in. We're not just here for ourselves, but for the entire city. Too many churches, I think, only care about what happens inside their four walls, but we want to create a Christian community that's compelling in the city that we're in, wherever that is. And so, friends, that's our vision. That's just part of what we think makes this church a little bit different, a little bit unique. In a world where so many churches are seeking to maintain a tradition, we're here to be creative and ask, like, God, who do you want us to be next? And too many people want a kind of a solo faith. We're here to create Christian community. We want you to meet other people and grow together. Too many churches are boring or disconnected from daily life. We want to be compelling. I think too many churches have given up on reaching new and younger people. They're satisfied just growing older and failing to reach new people. We don't want to be that. We want to reach new generations. And then finally, I think there's too many churches that are more concerned with what happens inside than with what happens outside its walls. And we want to be a church that's making an active difference and is part of the community that we're in. So that's our vision, to create a Christian community that's compelling for new generations of people in St. Louis. And then lastly, I want to end by just talking about our practices, because I think this is where faith comes to life. People will say to me, okay, Matt, I'm in. Like, I like the mission. We want to, invite new people to become deeply committed followers of Christ. But what does it mean to follow Christ? Like, what is it that you want me to do if I'm a part of this church? And that's a great question. And what I want you to do are 6 things. And I didn't make these up, by the way. Hey, Acts chapter 2 has a picture of what the earliest church did. And we want you to not just come to church, but to practice following Jesus. So we have what we call 6 practices that come right out of Acts chapter 2. But let me say a word about that word, practice. I love that word, because practicing something means something that you do over and over to get better at it. And I had this realization, my daughter, when she was young, played softball, and I don't know how much time you've ever spent watching like kindergartners try to play softball, but it was hilarious. She was on a team called the Jelly Beans. And I remember sitting at a practice one time, and they were out there doing the things that you do. They were, throwing the ball, except they'd try to throw the ball and it would like go behind them somehow. They were catching the ball, although a lot of times they were trying to catch it like this and it would hit the glove and hit them in the face. They were learning how to hit the ball, like usually off a tee, and sometimes hitting all tee and no ball. But that's what they were doing. They were practicing, throwing, catching, and hitting. And then I remember that same day later on, I went to a Cardinals game that evening and here in St. Louis. And if you get to a Cardinals game early, they're doing warm-ups. And I was sitting there, and it just occurred to me, they were doing the exact same thing that Carly's team was just doing a few hours earlier. I mean, they were a lot better at it, but there they were, out there throwing the ball, catching the ball, taking batting practice, and hitting the ball. And it just occurred to me that no matter how long you've played baseball, you're never done with these things. I mean, you don't ever get to a point where you say, well, I know how to catch now. I don't ever have to, worry about that again. Or I can hit good enough now. I don't have to practice that anymore. No, as long as you're a baseball player, you are throwing the ball, catching the ball, hitting the ball, learning to do those things better and better. And that's a lot how faith is. I mean, being a Christian isn't saying like, okay, I believe in Jesus, I'm done with that, check. But no, being a Christian means also following Jesus and practicing the faith. And this is something that we do over and over again. And so what does it mean to practice the faith? What do we think you're supposed to do? Well, here at the gathering, I want you to do 6 things. First, I want you to worship regularly. Part of what it means to follow Jesus is to make time each week for worship. That not to come to worship haphazardly, but to make that kind of a rhythm in our lives. I often say, unless you're sick or out of town, I hope that you'll be in worship. Make an effort to make that a priority in your life. Not only does it help us to connect with God and grow ourselves, but it's one of the ways that we show up for other people. I often say that I hope every weekend is a mountaintop moment for you, but I know it's not going to be. But when you come, especially maybe in those seasons where you're not necessarily feeling it, what's really cool is by you coming, you're helping to create the community that somebody else that day is having their mountaintop moment. They're having it because of you, because you show up to create the community. So the first practice is worship. The second practice is growing in a group. Part of what it means to follow Jesus is to grow in your faith alongside other people. That's why I'm always bothering you to get in a core group, because it's in a group that you can ask questions, begin to read the Bible with other people, learn to pray and pray for one another, encourage other people, connect and form friendships. It's really the place that we begin to grow in what it means to not only love God, but to love other people. So I want you to be in a group here at the gathering. Thirdly, we hope that you begin to develop a prayer life. I want you to pray. And I put it really simply. I mean, so many of us live our lives kind of only thinking about what we want, but prayer helps us to listen to God. What is it that you want me to do? And I want you to listen to those nudges that God puts in your life. There's a lot of ways to pray, and we're going to be here to help teach you what it means to pray, but I want you to be a person that seeks out God's will in your life and not just your own. So I want you to pray. Fourth, I want you to serve. Part of what it means to follow Jesus is to not just live our lives for ourselves, but to serve other people. And there's a lot of opportunities. You're going to hear more about them when you get in class this week, to serve inside and outside of our church. But every week the gathering operates because so many of you serve in kids ministry and worship and hospitality, welcoming others. It's a small way that you can begin to give part of who you are to help make the community happen. It also battles that tendency for us to be like consumer Christians and turns us into creator Christians, people who don't just consume, but help create it for other people. It's also a great way to just meet others. So I want you to serve when you're here at the gathering. The fifth thing is we want you to give. Jesus teaches us that we're not supposed to keep everything that we have for ourselves, but the Bible calls us to give some of what we have away for the purposes of God in the world. The Bible holds up the tithe, giving away your first 10% financially to support the work of God in the church. Here at the gathering, I talk about it less like that because I think a tithe is overwhelming to a lot of people. Some of you give more than that. Some of you give that. Some of you don't give anything. I think what's important, though, is that we listen, that Jesus wants us in a world that's so focused on getting and accumulating, and that more stuff is the pathway to happiness, that we begin to follow Jesus, who says, no. Simplicity, giving, not getting, is a pathway to happiness. So I encourage you to start giving regularly here at the gathering. Calculate that as a percentage of your income, and then every year just seek to grow in becoming a more and more generous person. You can learn more about how to give on our website. You can set up to automate your giving, which I encourage you to do. And then the last practice is invitation. We really think that part of what it means to follow Jesus is not just to receive faith and have faith for ourselves, but to invite other people to experience it. Not coerce them, not try to convince them, not tell them that they're going to hell if they don't, but just to invite them to discover maybe what you've discovered here. And so I really hope that you'll share the gathering with other people. If we're doing a sermon series that you think connects with a friend or a neighbor, or people that are hurting or struggling, or maybe just feel kind of bored in life and need something new, I hope that you will invite them to come and experience our community. It might surprise them. Maybe they don't know a church like this exists. So when people say, okay, Matt, what do you want me to do here? What does it mean to be a part of this? I want you to worship every week. Make that part of your rhythm. I want you to grow in a group. I want you to begin to pray and seek out God's voice in your life. Serve. I want you to give financially, and I want you to invite other people. I want these, not because it's what I want, but because that's what Scripture asks of us. That's what the book of Acts shows us as a model. That's how we actually grow in understanding who Jesus is more and more in our lives. So if you're feeling kind of stuck in your faith, start practicing some of those things in new ways. These are the things that we always do. We never are done growing in them. So I hope you worship and grow in a group. Pray, serve, give, and invite. And as we close, I want to say a word about membership, because people will ask me sometimes, well, man, what does it mean to be a member of the church? Does it even matter if I'm a member? And I always say we would love for you to be a member. Membership for us doesn't mean that you get any kind of special privileges. In fact, I often say that, become a member means you lose visitor privileges. But membership is a way of kind of making that transition from saying, like, I've been coming to this church, it resonates with me, I like it, I want to call it my church. For this part of my journey, like, I want this to be my church, and we make a commitment to be a part of it. And so our mission, our vision, our practices, those are the things that you commit to in order to be a member. If you want to be a member, this week in Explore group, your pastor will talk to you about that. I encourage you to reach out to us if you want to become a member. We want that for you because we want to know that other people are committed to this as much as we are. But we just ask two questions when you become a member. Do you commit to our mission and our vision? Inviting new people to become deeply committed followers of Christ, or creating a Christian community that's compelling for new generations of people. And you say, I do. And the second question is simple. Then as a committed person, do you promise to follow Christ through these 6 ways alongside other people? Worship and being in a group and serving and giving and prayer and inviting other people. And you say, I do. And then we welcome you into membership. And we do that every month alongside baptisms. And so I'd love to have you call this church, The Gathering, your church right now. I think it's really important to have people who are committed to this as their church. So just as we close, I hope you've experienced The Gathering in the way that I talk about it. It's been a place that you felt welcomed as you are, but that you've been challenged to grow in light of who Jesus is. That it's a place that invites you when you're new, but also helps you to grow if you've been here a while. I hope that you've experienced it as, creative and compelling, something you want to come to. You don't feel like you have to come to. I hope that you begin to be challenged to make faith something that you don't just check off, like I believe in Jesus, I'm done, but that you practice it. And you might be at different levels with some of those things. Like you might feel very new, like jelly bean level, or you might feel like I've been doing this all my life, Matt. You might be like cardinal level, but I hope that here you practice following Jesus through those practices that I named. But most of all, I just want to end by saying, the journey to follow Jesus and be part of a church has absolutely changed my life. And I really do believe, especially if you're new at this, it can change your life as well. I really believe that life with Jesus is better. And so I hope that you'll lean in, that you'll keep coming back, that you'll begin to make faith a habit. I hope The Gathering becomes a home for you. And as always, if you have any questions at all, please talk to your site pastor, reach out and talk to me. We're here to help make sure that you can continue to grow. And again, I just want to thank you so much for taking time to Explore, to be part of the group. Thank you.